So good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. Hope you are enjoying the final day of this virtual conference. I know it's been an interesting but educational conference all the way through. I'd like to thank everyone for logging in and for your interest in the City of Phoenix Key Corridors Master Plan. I am Eric Froberg, City Engineer for the City of Phoenix. While my background does include 20 plus years of engineering design, as the city engineer for the fifth largest city in the country and a longtime consultant, I do understand and appreciate the importance of transportation planning. As you will see in this presentation, the Key Corridors Master Plan, in conjunction with other city studies, is a great tool to assist the city in making decisions that impact all the city's users and modes of transportation. I have seen this presentation. It's very educational. You'll enjoy it very much. Some brief introductions for your speakers today. Brian Fellows has almost 30 years of experience, including 17 years specializing in multimodal transportation and the built environment. Currently, he is the principal planner for the City of Phoenix Street Transportation Department. From 2016, for the 2013 to 2016, Brian created and ran Arizona's Safe Routes to Schools federal program. Additionally, Brian was a technical advisory committee member for designing the STAR community rating system, an application reviewer for the bicycle-friendly communities and bicycle-friendly university program, development team member for the walk-friendly communities program. Brian also has a Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of Arizona and an MBA from Arizona State University, and also attended Georgetown University. Vamshi Yasetti has more than 20 years of experience as a multimodal transportation planner. Vamshi balances planning, out-of-the-box ideas, engineering, GIS, and technical know-how to create transportation improvement solutions that work. He holds bachelor's and master's degrees in civil engineering, but discovered early on that transportation planning was where his heart was. Vamshi's experience includes managing local, regional, and corridor multimodal transportation planning studies, travel demand modeling, non-motorized transportation plans, traffic impact analysis, safety analysis, and GIS techniques to streamline data, applications, and analysis. So with that, I will turn it over to Brian. Enjoy.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everyone. Again, my name is Brian Fellows. I'm the principal planner for the City of Phoenix Street Transportation Department. I'm happy and excited to be here. I'm glad you guys are too. And I hope you've had a wonderful several days of conference so far. I want to open up by talking a little bit about, I guess, just what we think is perhaps ahead of the curve the KCMP is. We really wanted to take a brand new, fresh look at the guidance we provide to planning, designing, and constructing really the right street in the right place. We're looking at the street's overall role in overall transportation network. And one of the things we did from the outset, and with close cooperation with our city planning and development department, is recognize the adjacent land use and neighborhood contexts in how streets are designed and operated. Streets can take many forms. It can go cross town, but it may cross through different context areas. So you would expect that street would look and operate differently and operate on different speeds as it goes through different areas. And that's what the KCMP allows us to do. And then also, as another one of the many layers of the KCMP, to develop complete balanced networks for people of all ages and all abilities and all modes as well. It's not just a vehicular plan, far from it. We looked at 5 modes, and we will get to that in just a minute. So it's really a multi-pronged document, more than just a document. It's an approach. It's a logical approach, stepwise, that takes any user from an existing roadway cross-section, and other supporting information, and steps them through individual steps on how to get to the right cross-section for the right application. Hand in hand with this, it's a tool for helping them do that. There's a stepwise worksheet that we won't spend a lot of time on, but is a very valuable part of working through any project like this. And again, like I mentioned, it's not just vehicular, it's far from it. We looked at 5 different modes that Vamshi will detail a little bit, just to make sure that everybody's accommodated. Everybody travels in a combination of modes, and we can't just be unimodal. And then really the kind of the heart of the KCMP is its street cross sections. There's 16 of them. We'll talk more about examples of that. But we go from City of Phoenix's existing 6 or 7 or 8 standard cross sections to now more than double that, which allows us to be really more prescriptive, but at the same time, more flexible. And then another document that we don't spend a lot of time on today, but is really a huge portion of this, is over a 200-page document on guidance with respect to safety, including a safety toolkit and maps and indications of crash hotspots that our various department sections can use as they prioritize safety improvements. So with that, I'm going to turn over the next section to Vamshi. He's going to tell us a little bit more about kind of the need of the need for the KCMP and a little bit more about how it was developed.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vamshi El-City. I'm with Kittleson Associates. I've had the privilege to work on this project, right from the start, and it's been such a great experience, all throughout, and it's been great working with Brian and the team over at the City of Phoenix. I'll walk you through in terms of why this study came about and what kind of led to the process we took, in the reasons why we took the approach that we did. As you all know, the City of Phoenix continues to boom, and that's expected to continue out in the future, for the foreseeable future. At the same time, we all realize that our streets are built for driving, and that's what was needed at that point, and that's what the public needed at that point. So it made sense at that time. But now we know that the public wants more travel options. We do have good multimodal networks, but there's some key gaps throughout the city network that kind of render a lot of the users not to use the system the way it is. But at the end of the day, the city wanted to make sure that we develop a transportation network that kind of meets the needs for everyone that lives in the city of Phoenix. As I mentioned, the population within Phoenix is expected to grow about 28% by 2050, and then the employment is expected to increase by about 41%. While these increases mean really well for the economy for the region, at the same time, it adds additional stress to the already stressed network, roadway network for the city. That said, we did an outreach as part of this project and reached out to the community members and asked them for their feedback in terms of what type of a transportation system that they would like to see going forward. And as you can see, you would expect that the top 2 ones, which is basically well-maintained roads and safety, is what you would typically expect. What kind of surprised us was that there was a significant chunk of people who mentioned that they understand that streets may be congested, especially during peak hours, but what they would like is more reliable travel times. In addition, there was a significant uptick in the interest in terms of multimodal facilities with respect to pedestrian facilities, bicycle facilities, and transit. And when you see, for the question asking about how do you rank what is more important for you, again, you tend to see the typical answers, but what really stood out was a very good response for the multimodal options, which is light rail, bus, and then pedestrian bicycle facilities. So that kind of gave us a good idea as to making sure that we not only need to view designing the street system from a vehicle perspective, but a multimodal perspective. As you can see on the picture on the right, that's kind of a typical cross section that you have to work with the current system. Again, that's more favorable for vehicles and not multimodal. And it's also not sensitive to the street context. So that's one of the issues that we try to address as part of this key corridors master plan process. As with respect to driving, things just seem to, travel times and congestion just seem to keep on increasing. As you can see on the right, 2010 on 19th Avenue on average, it was about 35 minutes travel time, but now it's gone up to 45 minutes. And probably, once this COVID situation is figured out and things return to normal, we may end up going in the same trends. So keeping that in mind, we have the same street network, same right-of-way width to work with. We can't widen our way out. So our focus was essentially to move people and not necessarily vehicles. So with that in mind, we looked a lot deeper into expanding the multimodal component of this project. From a bicycle network standpoint, Phoenix has a pretty robust bicycle network, but as you can see on the right, it looks pretty dense, but there are critical gaps throughout the system. And then because of these critical gaps, a lot of riders don't tend to use the system that well. And then as you dig a little deeper, you'd also notice that there's like huge gaps in areas where there's absolutely no bike facilities. And then also the types of bike facilities that are currently there are not really, a typical rider does not feel comfortable riding on those facilities. So that our goal was to make sure that we come up with a complete bicycle network that serves a typical user. From a freight standpoint, as you all know, the freight patterns have changed significantly, not just in Phoenix, but everywhere, where now e-commerce and delivery have taken have increased significantly. And that kind of changes the need for the type of network that supports the freight needs as well. So that's another aspect that the KCMP addresses pretty well. And not to forget safety, our crash trends from fatality standpoints continues to increase year over year. And then when we compared it against peer agencies, as you can see, Phoenix ranks pretty high in terms of fatalities per 100,000 people. So what we tried to do was to first take the first shot at identifying where are these critical high injury intersections and corridor segments that the city can try to address first. So the map on the right essentially shows you where these intersections are and then where the corridor segments are. And this was kind of important because we wanted to make sure that safety was blended into the overall design process and does not become an afterthought. So that's why we ended up identifying these locations first. And as we were developing the street design guidelines, then we made sure that safety was taken into consideration as part of the design process and not necessarily an afterthought. In addition to all of these things that I've mentioned, there's also this component of emerging technologies and how that might impact our transportation system. And then an even bigger issue that I see is funding. Funding is always a challenge, and we seem to see less and less of funding, and the costs keep increasing for a lot of these mega projects. So with these issues, we wanted to make sure that the city is prepared to address a lot of these challenges. So how did we end up addressing a lot of these challenges? I'll kind of go over quickly in terms of the key outcomes and recommendations that kind of come out of this project. So the first thing that we developed was wanted to make sure that the street context kind of becomes part of the street design. So if you're in a downtown setting, the street cross-section has to be different and versus if you're in a rural setting. So we worked with the city's planning and development folks to basically build off of the general plan, place types, and then try to develop a more, kind of combine those into more logical categories of street surrounding context types. And that feeds into what the street cross-section needs to look like. So for the entire city, we developed this street context layer that the city could use going forward. And then this is what I think is a key outcome of the key corridors master plan. So we wanted to make sure that we view things from the perspective of a typical user on the type of mode that they would like to use. So for example, if you are a pedestrian, if you want to go from point A to point B, we wanted to make sure that they have the right network facilities that are safe and comfortable and are efficient. Similarly with the bicycle network, vehicle network, transit, and freight. So we try to view this from from each mode, and then for each mode, we try to develop a complete network that a user would be able to use. So that said, this is kind of the end result that we ended up coming up with. So for the first one is the vehicle network. Obviously, every street supports vehicles, but the key thing here is we identified which streets would serve as the core network, which are in the darker lines, and then the thinner lines represent the supporting network. So for each complete network that we developed, we try to identify which ones are core for that particular mode, and then which set of streets will serve as a supporting network for that particular mode. So as you can see, we developed 5 sets of complete networks, essentially using the same street system, but these networks were developed based on demand, the potential usage for that particular mode, and a lot of other criteria to basically identify which streets could be called the core network for each mode, and then which streets could be called the supporting network for each mode. Then at the end of the day, by doing a complete network system, as I showed before, we expect a 60% increase in bike facilities. And then, we expect about moving 10,000 more people using high capacity transit. And then the biggest thing I see is about a 100% jump in access to jobs for people. If they were to use, for right now, if they were to use a bicycle, within 20 minutes, they probably have less access to the number of jobs that they can go to. With the complete network, that essentially doubles to, by about 100%. In addition, we also looked at it from a neighborhood perspective. So each neighborhood would essentially see a huge increase in the number of bike facilities. And at the end of the day, the goal is to make sure that we connect people with the right origins and destinations that they want to make. So, in addition to that, because I mentioned earlier, funding is a key issue for this. We can't build our way out. So we wanted to help the city prioritize, which corridors to focus on. And we used a set of criteria to basically identify the key corridors that the city should focus on in the near term. And then these key corridors essentially mean that they should have a purpose in terms of serving regional. They should be like regional corridors. They are more meant to support and enhance economic growth, and then also at the same time serve as a reliable network for moving in and out of the city. So how did we accomplish all of this? Like Brian said before, we had fixed cross sections to work with before. So with this, we developed what are called street typologies. So what street typologies does is it gives you a lot of flexibility in kind of designing making the best use of the right-of-way that you currently have based on the surrounding street context and how the street is actually used. So the 3 key factors that play into the street typologies is, one is functional classification. This is really important because we need to first know whether, is mobility the key factor for that particular street, or is access to the adjacent land use a more priority. Once the classification is determined, then the key corridors actually, the master plan actually identifies for each corridor, what is the modal emphasis? Is it a transit emphasis corridor? Is it a vehicle emphasis corridor? Is it a bike emphasis corridor? So, and this was important because if it's a transit emphasis corridor, the corridor should have a different look and feel compared to a vehicle emphasis corridor. So for a vehicle emphasis corridor, you tend to move more vehicles through. And then from a transit emphasis corridor, you're trying to capture a lot of folks who want to use transit along that corridor and then move them. Again, last but not least is the surrounding street context. Again, working with the planning and development folks, we developed 5 street contexts that would be applicable here. And then street context is important because, again, if you're in a downtown setting and an arterial and a transit corridor, and that look and feel has to be different compared to another scenario. So that's why these 3 kind of factors played into how we developed the street typologies. Again, what Brian said earlier, safety was not an afterthought for us. So we did develop a very comprehensive safety strategies report. So we identified 5 key, 5 high crash segments, and then developed concepts, and then also developed a safety toolbox that, you know, for any scenario throughout the city, the safety toolbox could be used to address a lot of the safety concerns as well. I'm going to hand it over to Brian to talk about, you know, how they plan to take it going forward. Brian?
Yeah, thanks, Vamshi. So we structured our work, and particularly how the KCMP would actually be used, you know, by the various users in the different departments. We broke it up into 3 basic scenarios where we're going to be dealing with these kind of projects: pavement preservation, roadway reconstruction, or constructing brand new streets. The process is driven by a worksheet that you see on the right. There's actually more to it than that. We won't be getting into detail on that, but that's really the guts of the workshop that would be used, or the form that would be used to logically guiding people, users, through from existing roadway cross-section to finally determining what the best KCMP cross-section would be. Next slide, please. This is the schematic of the process that we use from step 1. Actually, there's a kind of a preamble step, but we won't get too much into that. But you can see it's a 6-step process primarily. We'll go through a couple of those or more, and give you kind of a general flavor of how this would proceed. Next slide, please. So the first step, number 1, you have to determine the roadway functional classification. That's not really too hard to do. A lot of people just would know this by heart, but to memorialize it, make it a formal process, and commit that to the worksheet, you really need to have an official answer. So the way you do that is one of 2 ways. We'll have 2 different KCMP websites, one for internal use, one for external users like developers and others. But either way, it would start out finding the roadway functional class. And you can either do that by going into the link that would open up a PDF for you. The other option that we're developing is to put a kind of an iframe GIS application into the website, and you can just basically toggle on this and all of the other layers. Next slide, please. The next step, 2 and 3. 2 is to determine if your project area is on a key corridor. And that's one of the things that Vamshi detailed, is that there is a network of key corridors. It's kind of the best of the best, or the most significant of the most significant, as it relates to and within each of the modal networks. Step 3 is determining, is your project on one of the networks? Not all streets are, a lot are, but once you know the answer to the questions steps 1, 2, and 3, you can then go into step 4. You can see below in this slide a kind of a snip from one of the web pages that just shows what would be the live link to download the PDFs for each one of those steps 1, 2, and 3. Again, the alternate would be to go into the iframe, the essentially Google-like application to find those. Next slide, please. Step 4 is to select the KCMP typology or specific cross-section, of which there's 16. You're looking at 7 of the most used ones we use in the city of Phoenix: A, B, C, C, M, D, E, and F. We end up with 16 of them in the KCMP, and we'll show those just in a minute. Next slide, please, Vamshi. This is what we have. These are the 16 KCMP cross sections. We have 5 major arterials, 2 collectors, 2 minor collectors, and 2 locals, which kind of expands our palette a little bit. And so we can really drill down to, the context sensitive nature of different roadway segments and where they would lie. Next slide, please. And again, the step 5, for all intents and purposes, that if you haven't gotten there yet as a user, you would now dig into the worksheet, and it would take you through using all the information you just gleaned through the links and such to help you go from existing cross-section to preliminary dimensional criteria for your desired cross-section. Next slide. This is just one example. We'll show a couple. This is an example of one of the 16 that you just saw on that list. It's a major arterial street with a vehicle or freight emphasis, primary, but with enhanced bicycle facilities. You can see you have your, as we do in all the cross sections, have them delineated on the bottom. You have your mobility zone. Those are the lanes of varying types. It could be vehicle lanes. It could be, active transportation lanes like bike lanes. And then on the outsides, it's pedestrian zone, which would include the places where you'd expect pedestrians to be. So some furniture zone and landscape zone within that. This is what the major arterial street cross section looks like for this particular scenario. Next slide. You'll see something like this, the street element details attached to each cross section to help you kind of get at the dimensional criteria, the preliminary dimensional criteria when you're filling out your worksheet. You can see that under the gray band, this is surrounding street context, you can see the 4 different columns that correspond to the nodes or the context sensitive areas that Vamshi talked about, the downtown node, regional urban node, the suburban commuter node, and neighborhood node. And those change, you can see from top to bottom. You can see we list on the left-hand side, the travel lanes, medians, bicycle facilities, landscape furniture zone, pedestrian, and also target speed. You will go into this and you will, based on the context sensitive column, essentially, you will find your essentially a range of possibilities to select lanes and dimensional criteria. What you can see in the takeaway from this slide, again, we're just looking at downtown node, but in a typical downtown node, you can see you would have between 2 and 4 travel lanes. They could be as narrow as 10 feet. And you can see all the places where you see a blue box, that would be our preferred width, although you can deviate from that based on context and with the required approvals. And all these dimensional criteria in all of the 16 are basically blessed by our traffic services division. The other takeaway is, especially in the downtown node, keep in mind, this is a major arterial we're talking. If you're going through a downtown, we can have a target speed as low as 25. Picture downtown Phoenix or wherever you're coming from, downtown Tucson. You don't want a 45-mile-an-hour road going through your middle of downtown where you're going to have thousands of people shopping, walking, etc. So we have the ability to focus on as low as 25 miles an hour in this situation. Next slide, please. This is another example. This is a collector street with a bicycle emphasis. You can see it has this mobility zone as well, but thrown in, we have a flex zone. And again, this is where the flexibility of the KCMP is built in. That flex zone, depending on the context, can take several looks or take several fashions. It could be a vehicle pickup drop-off zone. It could be a ride share queuing area. It could be a delivery zone. It could be a corral for bikes in certain areas. It just gives you some variability as you work through that worksheet. Next slide, please. And one for the local street, and this is a local street with pedestrian emphasis. Again, you don't see bicycles on this, but if it's a local street and the speeds are low enough, and you've crafted the proper context-sensitive lane widths and speed limits, a lot of times it will be comfortable already for many cyclists. Some may choose to hop on the sidewalk, but that's all right. And here again, it's again local street You have your mobility zone, got at least your 2 travel lanes, but you have a flex zone thrown in as well for context sensitive use. And then so the final step for us is really implementing this and taking this to the point where it's institutionalized in the city of Phoenix. And we're going to do that in kind of a 2-pronged way. We're going to try to integrate that into more enforceable mechanisms through general plan or general plan amendments. And also when we update the street classification map, we feel that the 16 cross sections will play a vital role in what our new street class map looks like. We expect a lot of the use of the KCMP will be in the capital improvements programs, projects. And then, because we realize that development takes place not incrementally, but really in large corridors. That's where the KCMP will have its strength, is to guide the development and the basically the parsing out of the right of way to the appropriate uses. Next slide, please. This is where the KCMP website and contents lives. More to come on that as we develop and enhance that. But that's all I have. I'm happy to turn it over to our moderator for other questions. And thank you, Eric.
Good deal. Hey, thank you guys. Very well done. Very informative. So we do have a couple questions here. All right. So the first one is, and I'll just throw it out there, and Brian and Vamshi, you guys can decide who should take it. So the first question, what are you doing to reduce travel, particularly single occupancy vehicle travel and working from home?
Well, I think there's kind of 2 answers to that. There's a huge educational piece that needs to be done, and we're developing a active transportation strategic plan right now that does have a very large education component to that. Not really part of the KCMP. We're charged with developing the right facility for the right place. We think that that given that, and as we expand our context sensitive facilities, that will give more people the comfort and the confidence to feel safe out there doing just that.
Okay. Here's another question. If a key corridor is designated for a specific transportation mode, does that mean that all other modes are prohibited?
The answer is no, and I apologize, we didn't mention that earlier on in the presentation. But the assumption is that when you see a corridor labeled as, say, a vehicle key corridor or a freight key corridor, that does not mean that all the other modes will be prohibited. And in fact, in a lot of cases, they'll be present anyway. What we're doing here with the KCMP is really kind of funneling the users to I guess the quote unquote right facility. You will always be able to travel on all facilities, all roadways, all 5,000 miles of roadway in the city of Phoenix. There are places where the KCMP will help develop the best ways, the best locations for, and the best routes for users to be. For instance, there will be people walking everywhere. Not so much in industrial areas, but they need to be accommodated, and they need to be separated enough from freight users and uses that you don't have conflicts and safety challenges. There will be people riding bikes everywhere. If there's not a lane for them, there will be a sidewalk for them. What we're trying to do is develop the collector roadway system off of the arterials, even though we know that there will be some people that choose to ride on arterials. They feel comfortable doing that, or maybe they're riding on the sidewalk of an arterial. But our collector roadway system is going to be where we're focusing that development. That is the best place. It's lower speed, lower volume, and arterials and major arterials, and that is really.
Okay, thanks. Here's another one. What is the timing for the updated street classification map and the typical sections that you've shown?
Well, I might turn that one back to you, Eric. I think, are you overseeing the future development of the street class map in any way? It's not in the next few weeks, I know that, but when that happens, we will be involved with that, hopefully.
Yeah, so lucky you, I was your moderator today. So yeah, we, within the city engineer's office, we are working on updates, as you know, to the design manual. And as part of that, you know, we've worked with the KCMP and the other studies, the downtown transportation plan, which was a previous presentation here, that we will incorporate within the street classification map. That will have to go back to, you know, that's one of the documents that goes back to council. So we are working on that. As with most things, COVID has shifted priorities a little, but that is definitely one that, you know, we are actively looking at and trying to get back to get an updated one as quickly as we can, but also utilizing the information that's within your study here and that you've shown today. So good question. All right, let's see here. Number 3, question number 3 or 4, kind of lost count. Are you doing anything to improve traffic signal management to ensure smooth traffic flow?
Well, the answer to that is yes. I'm going to defer to our signals group and our folks who specialize in that. But yeah, and in fact, we're piloting some new signalization. We're also installing many new pedestrian hybrid beacons with a lower delay time to make sure pedestrians and bicyclists and other users can get across the street with a minimum of delay. But in terms of traffic flow, yeah, I believe some new technologies are being piloted even now to make sure that flow is maintained.
Okay, here's another one. Here's a hypothetical, it looks like. If a planned project is along an arterial street segment that passes through downtown or a high activity node, what changes will the KCMP advise?
I'd let Vamshi answer this. He's very familiar with each detail set for each cross-section. So I think he'd be perfect to answer this.
So again, it depends on based on the land use context and the classification of the roadway. You know, the cross-section could be different. So we would essentially use the worksheet that Brian was showing earlier to basically look at what the current cross-section is and then what the proposed surrounding street context is going to be, and essentially kind of repurpose that street to a different and more context-sensitive you know, cross-section. So basically that could mean that if you're in the downtown context, the lane widths for travel lanes could be reduced. More bike facilities could be added if the right-of-way allows for it. So again, it's a matter of kind of trade-offs in terms of what is more important to you for that surrounding street context.
Okay, excellent there. So I don't have any more questions right now. We do have 5 minutes remaining. Vamshi, I don't know, do you have a slide that has yours and Brian's contact information within the presentation? We could keep that one up. So if there are other people that would like to contact you outside of the Zoom meeting, that would be available to them?
Sorry, I don't have that slide built into this. So.
Okay. Oh, here's another question. Somebody saved us from the awkward last 5 minutes of silence. So how does bike share and the scooter program and other kind of micro mobility transportation technologies affect your future plans, or how are they incorporated within KCMP?
Well, I think the KCMP is flexible enough and takes into account specific modes and contexts that I'm not sure that I'm not concerned that bike share or scooter share will not be accommodated. They will. I think there'll always be a mode. I don't know how if that mode will grow or shrink in the next few years. It's hard to say. But what we want to do is have, the right place for them to be in the right context. And so they are sharing the road and the vehicles are sharing the road with them in a way that's safe for everyone. The goal of the Key Corridors Master Plan is to make sure there's complete networks for all modes. Easier said than done, but irrespective of the mode, I mean, there will be a place for them to be. As we implement the KCMP and create these spaces, there will be a safe place for them to be.
If I could expand on what Brian said, the KCMP, the way it's structured right now, is flexible enough to accommodate, these modes, bike share, scooter share, anything that is. So we have within the Key Corridor street typologies, flex zones that could be, molded into whatever, new needs that may come about. And then again, that kind of takes into the street context and the need as well. So.
Okay, no, yeah, thank you. That was a good answer. Let's see here. Let me check the questions here again. Here's one. 10-foot traffic lanes are likely, so here, this is not the city engineer's opinion, I'm just reading the question. 10-foot traffic lanes are likely to cause more accidents. How do you plan to clear accident scenes rapidly?
Well, that's almost like a two-part question. I think the question assumes that 10-foot traffic lanes would be where they are not intended or not in the best location. There are very few locations. For instance, if you have a major arterial, high-speed major arterial, you're probably not going to have a lot of 10-foot lanes. Where you're going to see the 10-foot lanes is as you get more into downtown nodes, neighborhood nodes, where traffic speeds are lowered proportionally as well. So the lower speeds will help prevent those accidents as well. In terms of clearing them, that's kind of beyond the scope of the KCMP. If there are any law enforcement officers from the city of Phoenix listening in, please feel free to chime in.
Yeah, that's a good answer. That seems to be more of the second part. There is more of a kind of operational item, not so much a planning document. So I do here in the last minute or so, I want to thank you, Brian and Vamshi, for the excellent presentation, for sharing this with us. We hope everyone out there has a great weekend, has enjoyed the conference. There is another couple sessions. We get a redo of the keynote from yesterday, so that's great. So I hope you all have a great weekend, and thank you for attending our session.
Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.